Hello guys, welcome to Movies and Celebs Recap. Today I will show you the recap of the movie called Killers of the Flower Moon, released in 2023. In a modest village dwelling, Osage tribe elders conduct a mournful ceremony, burying a ceremonial pipe piece in the earth. This act of reverence precedes a monumental discovery, oil, turning the Osage into the wealthiest community globally. However, this affluence attracts unsolicited oversight from the U.S. government, which imposes guardians to manage the Osage's wealth, deeming them incapable. After World War I, Ernest Burkhart came back to Oklahoma. He was picked up by Henry, who took him to meet his uncle, William King Hale. William was known as the King of the Osage Hills and was loved for being kind and caring towards the Osage people. He saw himself as their friend and helper. Ernest talked with William about his time in the military. Their talk was stopped when Ernest's brother, Byron, came into the room. William told Ernest to avoid causing trouble because he was not only a big businessman but also a deputy sheriff and wanted to keep things peaceful. He also gave Ernest a book about Osage culture and history and asked him to read it. Even though the Osage Nation was doing well in the United States, many of its members were being killed under mysterious circumstances. These deaths weren't properly looked into and were often wrongly called suicides. Molly Kyle, a rich Osage woman, talked about how much money her family had but couldn't use some of it for her diabetes medicine. This was because the person in charge said she needed her family guardian's approval to use her own money. Ernest, who was working as a cab driver, met Molly during his job, and she became a frequent passenger. King suggested that Ernest should start a romantic relationship with Molly. Ernest took this advice and got closer to Molly over time. Ernest and his brother, Byron, were also robbing the Osage people and using the money for gambling. Ernest and Molly's relationship grew into love, and they got married in the traditional Osage way. During a celebration, King tried to comfort a sick Osage woman who later died. While the Osage were sad about their loss, King told Ernest to see this as a chance. He said that if more of Molly's family died, Molly would get more money, and if Molly died, then Ernest would get her wealth. Life resumed its normal pace for a bit after the woman's passing. Ernest and Molly, who by then were parents, faced an unforeseen incident. Lizzie, Molly's mother, spotted an owl outside the window and cautioned Molly, interpreting it as an ominous sign of death looming over their family. Lizzie expressed her affection for Anna, Molly's sister, while indicating her disapproval of Molly for choosing to marry a white man, leading Molly to silently walk away. Meanwhile, Anna, drunk, tried to sit in Byron's lap, but he rejected her, causing her to become upset and slap him. Molly stepped in to calm Anna, but the situation escalated when Anna saw Byron flirting with a maid. Ernest and Molly intervened to prevent further conflict as Anna reached for a gun. Ernest quickly took the gun from Anna, escorted Byron out, and Molly consoled Anna, attempting to calm her. The next morning, Anna and Byron resolved their differences and left together, marking Molly's last interaction with Anna before learning of her tragic death. When Molly visited Anna, she broke down in tears, and Ernest was there to comfort her. On that same day, the community was shaken by the discovery of another Osage man's death, with both incidents being declared homicides. After the tragic deaths, Molly organized a meeting to offer a reward for information that could lead to the arrest of her sister's murderer. King added another $5,000 to the reward and asked people to bring any clues to him. The tribal council sent Mr. McBride to Washington, D.C. to ask the Indian Affairs Commission for help with the investigation, but sadly, he was killed with a knife. Ernest and Molly consulted with William Burns, a talented private investigator Molly hired to look into her sister's death. Burns found out that Bill Smith had also been looking into the case. It came to light that Anna was expecting a baby when she died, but no other details were found. What Molly didn't know was that Ernest was secretly watching her and telling King everything Burns discovered. In a separate event, some men desecrated Anna's grave and took her jewelry. Ernest knew Blackie led these men. He tried to get Blackie to agree to murder his wife's sister, Rita, to claim insurance money by pretending it was a car theft. But before anything happened, Blackie got caught. King was angry and criticized Ernest for not keeping things under control, especially since Molly ended up hiring a detective. As William Burns was about to enter his room, two men ambushed him, attacked him severely, and then he disappeared. Molly was left without any updates about the detective or the progress of the investigation. Ernest and King sought help from Henry Grammer to complete a dangerous task initially assigned to Blackie. They considered hiring A.C. Kirby, an expert in explosives. Meanwhile, Molly, struggling with diabetes, refused her insulin treatment, leaving Ernest to dismiss the doctors and handle the medication himself. Despite a heated argument, Molly eventually allowed Ernest to give her the injection. Around the same time, Henry Roan, a member of the Osage Nation and Molly's former husband, became ill. King revealed his interest in Roan's health due to being the beneficiary of Roan's life insurance, needing him to live a bit longer. Lizzie's health deteriorated daily until she passed away. During a dinner, Molly shared with King about hiring a private investigator, unaware that Ernest and Byron were responsible for the investigator's disappearance. King suggested the investigator might have left after being paid, and shortly after, Ernest and Molly announced her pregnancy, which King didn't receive warmly. Ernest and King went to Henry Grammer for help with a job Blackie left unfinished. Henry recommended they hire an expert in explosives named A.C. Kirby. At the Burkhart home, when doctors came to give Molly her insulin for diabetes, she didn't want the shot. Ernest ended up asking the doctors to leave and kept the insulin kit himself. After the doctors left, Ernest tried to talk to Molly, but she got upset, leading to a fight between them. Molly finally let Ernest give her the shot, and he comforted her, promising to keep her safe. Ernest pressured John into a scheme to make it seem like Henry had taken his own life. They became friends, often hanging out and drinking together. Eventually, they went to a secluded spot where John shot Henry dead. Afterward, John met Ernest to let him know he had done it, giving Ernest the gun before leaving. Ernest and King had a disagreement about Henry's death because it looked more like a murder than a suicide. Despite King telling Ernest to find AC and proceed with their plan, Ernest asked John to help find AC instead. One night, while the Burkhart family was sleeping, there was a sudden explosion. Molly quickly made sure the children were okay while Ernest went outside to see what happened. He found out it was the Smiths' house that had blown up, where Molly's sister Rita, her husband, and their housekeeper had all died. Ernest was stunned as he watched them take care of Rita's body. Overcome with emotion, he went back inside to his family. When Molly found out about her sister, she screamed in deep sorrow. After Rita's death, Molly decided to go to Washington, D.C. to ask for help in solving the Osage murders. What Molly didn't know was that her health was failing not just because of diabetes, but also because she was being poisoned by Ernest and King, with the help of the doctors she trusted to get better. When Ernest found Molly weak in bed, he pretended to care for her by giving her another shot of insulin. Soon after, Tom White, an agent from the U.S. Bureau of Investigation, knocked on their door. Ernest learned that the tribal council had asked the U.S. government for help, leading to agents being sent to investigate the Osage murders. When the agent wanted to talk to Molly, Ernest hesitated to let him in, claiming Molly was resting after her diabetes treatment and asked the agent to come back on Friday. Ernest, worried, quickly went to tell King about the agent's arrival. But King was busy with a festival. Despite Ernest's obvious worry, King told him to relax and sit down, then excused himself, not realizing they were being watched. The next day, King tried to collect insurance money left by Henry Roan at the insurance agency, but was turned away. Even though he tried to use his influence to scare the employee, it didn't work, and he left angrily. The investigation agents spoke with the Shaw brothers about digging up Anna's body, which they said was part of Indian tradition. Agent Tom White tried to question King, but King declined, saying it wasn't a good place to talk. They agreed to meet later. Blackie, who worked for King, tried to rob a bank but got caught. Despite this, King kept supporting Osage community projects to seem like a friend to them. Worried about getting caught, King decided to get rid of some of his men, including A.C. Kirby, who blew up the Smiths' house, and his partner, Henry Grammer. A.C. and Henry tried to rob a store, leading to A.C.'s death, while Henry escaped only to crash his car later. At the same time, the Bureau of Investigation agents were closely looking into Henry Roan's murder. They kept seeing King, Ernest, and Byron's names come up in their research. They found out Byron and Kelsey Morrison were with Anna the night she died. After further questioning, Morrison was caught and agreed to help the authorities. A fire broke out at King's Ranch right after an agent, pretending to be an insurance salesman, sold a fire insurance policy there. This incident made the agents more suspicious of King's involvement in insurance fraud. Over time, Ernest grew more and more paranoid, haunted by his past actions. In a drastic move, he poisoned both his alcohol and his wife's insulin, drinking the contaminated alcohol himself before giving his wife the insulin and then losing consciousness. When the agents took Ernest for questioning, he didn't say anything at first. However, after Blackie, who was handcuffed, was brought in, Ernest asked to talk to him privately. During this talk, Blackie encouraged Ernest to admit everything for his family's sake. Tom White tried to get Ernest to confess, telling him he was being used because he was vulnerable. Wanting to go back to his wife, Ernest finally gave in. Tom asked him about Henry Roan's murder. Ernest's decision to confess led to J.K.'s arrest, who then realized Ernest had turned him in. Agents visiting Molly were appalled by how sick she had become. Seeing she was near death, one agent quickly took her to the hospital for emergency care. At the same time, King gave himself up to the authorities but claimed he was not guilty. Ernest, now in a car with Tom White, was told he wouldn't face charges if he testified against others. As Molly started getting better, King's situation looked worse. Blackie ended up telling the agents everything he knew, giving them enough proof to arrest King. In court, when Ernest was about to testify, Hamilton, who claimed to be his lawyer, tried to stop him from speaking. Ernest, however, stated he didn't recognize Hamilton as his lawyer since they had never met, causing a stir among the Osage Council. After the first trial, Ernest got to see Molly, who was getting better. During the next trial, with Molly present, Morrison testified that he and Byron had killed Anna Brown on King's command, showing no regret for his actions. Sadly, after the second trial, one of Molly and Ernest's children died from whooping cough. Tom White visited Ernest in jail to give him this heartbreaking news, leading Ernest to scream in despair. Following his child's funeral, Ernest chose to fully confess at the third trial, revealing King as the orchestrator of the Osage murders, aiming to take the fortune belonging to Molly's family. Ernest admitted his genuine love for Molly despite their dark past. When Molly questioned Ernest about her poisoning, he denied it, causing her to leave him. The Shaw brothers, accused of supplying the poison for Molly's insulin and suspected in other deaths, were not prosecuted due to lack of evidence. Byron faced no jail time due to a hung jury. William Hale was sentenced to life but claimed his innocence and was paroled in 1947, allegedly after paying off politicians. Despite a ban from Oklahoma, he visited family and died at 87 in an Arizona nursing home. Ernest also received a life sentence but was pardoned years later and lived in Osage County with Byron. Molly divorced Ernest and remarried, but sadly died from diabetes at 50 in 1937. She was buried next to her family members. Thank you for watching Movies and Celebs Recap. If you enjoy this movie and are willing to see more, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel with bell notifications on, so you never miss our future video. Until next time, guys, take care.